Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I am going to be replacing the fan on top of the input shaft of the Transaxle on a John Deere X324. This is the Quadra-Steer. Pretty unique drive system here, and the customer complaint said that he was hearing a noise from in back of where the rear wheels are. And I looked at all the idlers are good. This unit has, I don't know, about 700 hours. Actually, I should just be able to turn this on. How many hours is that? 632 hours. So it's got a decent amount of hours on it. And this is definitely a lot of work to get to this Transaxle. On the X300 series, the lower models that is not the Quadra-Steer, you usually can get access to the back side of the Transaxle here by removing one of the screens here, and then you can reach in, lock the pulley in place, and remove it. But unfortunately, that is not as easy to do with this one because you have this shaft that comes back here that steers the back wheels. Now, typically what happens with these things is that over time, on the earlier X300 series, this pulley would strip out the teeth that are inside from the hardened shaft would be okay, but the pulley itself would strip itself out. I'm having a problem here because, as you can see, even though that the pulley is good, the fan is not. The fan is supposed to be locked, and I think this is what he's actually hearing. This is actually pretty flimsy. But I ran into another issue with this X324 Quadra-Steer because after I got the nut off here, I can't get this off without removing this shaft that does the Quadra-Steer. So I have to take apart all this linkage in order to get to it. So I have to take apart this bolt, that bolt, 4 bolts here to release the pin, and then this should lift right out. But that's a lot of work. But, well, gotta do it. Here we go. Alright, so not as terrible as I thought. So what I had to do is I had to rotate the wheel this way a little bit because it'll actually clear over here where the bolts would go. So there's actually 3 that go right here, and I just was able to lift it up ever so slightly. You can see the bearing showing, and I was then able to lift out the fan and also the pulley here. And looks like the splines here are just fine, and it should be because it is hardened steel. If let me get you some light here. This is the updated pulley, so it has the hardened steel center. Don't have to worry about that, but here is the smoking gun, and I apologize for the mess here because I'm working on fixing our Canadian glider. Right here, let's take a look at what we got here. Half of the teeth are missing, so that's why it was wobbly. It was doing this, and you can see on the tips of the fan was actually hitting this part right here as it was spinning. So that definitely was the problem. And all the idlers in the front are good to go. But yeah, all right, so new fan. And it's also missing the spring washer that goes in between the fan and then the spindle that goes on top. We'll have to go and replace that too. And I see those get disintegrated over time. My guess is that it just rusted away over time. But we'll replace those pieces, and that should at least solve the noise problem that the customer was hearing. The drive belt actually is in really good shape. It must have been replaced at some point before I got in here. But just to give you guys an idea of what it's like to have to go and take one of these pieces, at least disassemble it to this extent. There are 2 bolts on the back. There's 2 hidden bolts underneath the foot plate, and then over here you actually have to remove the 2 large 15mm bolts that hold the forward and backward pedals there. And then once you do that, the whole foot plate goes and comes right apart. You do have to actually take off the gas cap in order to get that off. And then the gas tank itself is just sitting here in between the frame rails. There's really nothing else holding it on in between the frame rails. It's just resting on this little peg here, and then the rest is sitting on the frame here. You know, gently move that out of the way because it is full of fuel. But yeah, we'll give it a good cleanup here once the parts come in. One note I forgot to mention, so in the center here of where the footplate is the height adjustment for the mowing deck. In order to get this off, it's actually just held in by 2 compression fittings, and it's very, very difficult to get to. And what you would basically have to do is, if I can, you know, let's get this in the light a little better. Actually, I might be able to do this here. You can see how it is 2 washers pushed down, and it's got a flat D side to key it to the mechanism. I was able to gently wiggle this out of the way, and it was able to come apart from that shaft. And your luck may be different. Sometimes I've had problems of getting these things off to the point where I've actually broken the plastic. The proper way to do it is to get in there and push these washers up so that it's not compressing the pieces here. I don't know how well there we go. I'm out of focus here. Sorry guys. But that is the right way to do it, but a lot of times you can just wiggle them loose and you should be fine. But just wanted to mention that was the only other thing you had to remove in order to remove the foot plate, which is right here. All right, here we are almost a week later. Parts came in, and you can definitely see how the middle of that got stripped out, but when you look at the new one, the teeth go all the way up and down. And what was missing was this little washer here. There's the part number. They actually gave me 2, but they're extremely thin, so it makes sense that these would eventually disintegrate over time. But we should be able to put these in, and in order to get that back on, these 3 bolts need to come off so you can move this out of the way. The wheels need to be turned slightly this way, and we can install the fan, which, if just for a quick test fit here, all the way down, and now it's locked to the shaft, so that's exactly what we want. We'll then take, for a little bit of compression, and then finally, for another test fit, this is where it gets tricky because this piece is in the way. I don't know how well this is going to work. There we go. This has got to get lifted up. It's the only way for me to lock that in place. Excellent. Well, let's get that put back together. All right, everything's put back in place, and what made it a lot easier is that if I unhooked this spring here that actually holds the tensioner for the hydrostatic belt, I just pulled it from this direction here, unhooked it from here, and that loosened the belt. That's how I was able to get it on and off. And now I'll just put these 3 bolts back into place so that we can properly reinstall the quadristeer linkage. Here is the machine all reassembled, and I'm sorry I did not have a chance to film all of this. I've been trying to catch up on some work. However, the 3 bolts here are your 3 main enemies here as far as getting this fan and spindle off. Everything else is good. I put the belt back on, and when I first started up, it wasn't spinning because when I disconnected the spring right here, I actually caused the belt to slip off its pulley off the engine. So I had to take everything apart again, take the mowing deck off, take the spring off, put the belt back onto the engine pulley, and then re-stretch everything across again, and then put the spring back on to put it all back together. Ran into a little frustration there, but I got it all back together, and now we have a functioning transmission again without that clunking noise in the back. Let's give this a try. Nice and clear. No noise. All right, guys, well, I'm going to end the video here, and I'm sure this is not going to be the only time I'm going to be seeing this machine. The gentleman was very happy that I was able to get this repaired for him, so I'm sure I'll be seeing this machine at least once a year for regular maintenance. If there's any questions or comments, please leave them down below, and I will see you guys on the next project that comes my way. Cheers.